All righty. I'm here again today with Representative Mike Steele from the 12th District, state representative. Good morning, Mr. Steele.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the call, and thanks for taking the time out of your day to sit down and talk with us. So again, I'm from the Washington Voting Project, and of course, we're trying to get all the word about the candidates and their platforms, and of course their personalities out to the general public. And that's exactly what we're hoping to do today in this interview, which hopefully is more of a conversation than an interview. Hope it's not just a back and forth question and answer kind of thing. But yeah, I'd love to find out some more information about you.
Absolutely. I'm certainly sorry that I'm not on camera. I'm driving right now, but we were able to work out the time, and glad that we're able to have a chance to chat.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to talk to you regardless of what the setting is. So yeah, I have a couple questions just to guide our conversation at the beginning, and I'm sure people are curious. Primarily, did you grow up in the 12th district? If not, how'd you end up calling it home? Kind of, what's your backstory with the 12th?
Yeah, actually, so I was born and raised here I actually grew up in Manson. So the 12th legislative district, if folks don't know, represents all of Chelan County, all of Douglas County, part of Grant, and part of Okanagan. And so as I said, grew up in Manson, graduated from Manson High School. My family was one of the original 5 families that founded Lake Chelan. So we've been here about 125 years. I went on to go to school at Pacific Lutheran University, where I graduated with degrees in political science and business administration with minors in chemistry and biology. And then moved on to Washington, D.C., where I worked in the White House Political Affairs Office, interning there, serving 10 states. So Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, North Carolina, South Carolina, the Dakotas, Alaska, Hawaii, and I'm Wyoming, I'm in Montana. I'm sure I'm missing some, but anyway, it was a great experience. And then moved back to Olympia, and then ultimately back to my hometown, where I've been serving as the CEO of the Lake Chelan Chamber of Commerce for the last 15 years, and then served on city council in Chelan before running for the State House and being elected.
Fantastic. Obviously, that's a ton of experience, and it seems like in certainly in different kind of sectors or different types of experience. I was wondering if you could maybe comment a little more in depth on how those experiences have helped prepare you and strengthen your skills as someone who can kind of speak for the people in the 12th district or advocate for the needs of the people in the 12th district.
Oh, sure. Great question. Yeah, I mean, my whole life, in my whole adult life and career have been about economic development, creating jobs, working with people, working through issues with people. I serve on a number of philanthropic boards, so really trying to help people where they are and what they, find ways to meet their needs. Philanthropic boards include being president of the Rotary Club locally. I was one of the district officers, the youngest district officer, the youngest president of our Rotary Club locally ever before elected, and then serve as the current president of the Hospital Foundation, so the philanthropic arm of the local hospital. I also serve as a trustee for the Community Foundation, which is the largest philanthropic organization in North Central Washington, stewarding over $90 million to help people of greatest need. So we help in fire recovery, we help in areas of education, we help in areas of homelessness and domestic violence. So lots of ways in which I'm involved in the community. But my public service is just one way. My career has been devoted to developing the economies of North Central Washington and trying to create jobs for folks. And then my own family, we of course have had orchards for the last 125 years, apples and cherries, employing lots of folks over the years, and being involved in the agricultural sector. It's just a great way to stay connected to one of the major economies in our region, along with tourism, which is what I do in my day job, marketing the Lake Chelan Valley. So it's all kind of a unique set of circumstances and unique set of jobs and volunteering that I feel, keeps me connected to the people of my district.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think I've probably gotten a little bit ahead of myself. For people who don't exactly know maybe the size of the district or the land that it encompasses, can you tell me just a little bit about, I guess, first of all, just the boundaries of the 12th district? I mean, it's a pretty large district, and then also maybe kind of describe the people that live there in your mind. I'm sure people would be very curious about that.
Yeah, it's a huge district. It's actually the largest geographic district in the state, so it encompasses 9,000 square miles, and we have a variety of economies. It's sort of on the spectrum. There are it ranges in scale of size as far as communities are concerned. I represent 29 school districts, so more school districts than any other person in the legislature, which I think is a unique thing, especially since I serve as the ranking member of the K-12 Education Committee, and also soon to be ranking member of the Capital Budget. And then I serve on the Appropriations Committee. So all of these committees really lend themselves well to the things that people in our district are going through. We have, most of my school districts have populations that are on free and reduced lunch. It kind of varies as far as percentage from school district to school district, but anywhere from 50 to 80% on free and reduced lunch. So kind of gives you a sense of who in the district is living and how they're living. We really, I feel like our district that's really devoted to community. So keeping connected with one another and trying to help each other as best we can is a major focus. But in a lot of these communities that I represent, the school and the hospital are sort of the lifeblood of those communities. They are what drive the economy. So it's an interesting place to live. It also happens to be, there's a disproportionate sort of gap in the sense that we have, a very resort-centric district. So lots of folks from the west side like to come here and vacation in places like Leavenworth and the Methow Valley and Lake Chelan. But we also have, much smaller communities like Bridgeport and Pateros that aren't as influenced by those dollars and by the Puget Sound. So, you do what you can to address issue by issue and community by community.
Absolutely, absolutely. I see you mentioned the school districts back there, and I also noticed that just like last year, right? You were awarded a Legislator of the Year award from Washington STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, of course. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about maybe perhaps why you were awarded that that prize or what that entails. Yeah, I'm sure people will be curious about that.
Yeah, so it's the first time that the Washington STEM Network recognized legislators for their work. Myself and my colleague Vandana Slatter from Bellevue were awarded the first award ever given by the STEM Network, and it was because of our tireless work in STEM. And I have a huge passion for career and technical education and trying to figure out how we get more students the opportunity to engage in career and technical education. And I think STEM and STEAM, of course, adding in the art component, are essential elements of education. And we need to figure out how every student in the public school system, in the school system in general in Washington State, has access to that kind of career and technical education. And so she and I passed legislation that would help create career paths and paths to graduation utilizing career and technical education along with STEM. So along with just getting your basic credits, this would be an option for students who are engaged in career and technical education, or CTE. They could use some of their CTE credits to get them qualified for graduation, and some waivers that would allow them to use that CTE to accelerate their graduation pathway. So we're going to continue to work on that, but it was a huge honor. And again, for being the first time legislators have been recognized, it was, again, just a really big honor for me. And I'm going to continue my work in career and technical education and STEM.
Fantastic, fantastic. You said that was passed into legislation?
It was, yes.
So I'm curious, has there been a chance to see maybe any impact that has had in terms of leading people to those career paths, or lifting the weight off some of those high school students' shoulders or anything?
Well, it's kind of been interesting, right? We passed the legislation and then COVID hit. So the way in which we educate has been drastically changed, as we're all aware. And we've been working on, certainly career and technical education and STEM. They're really hands-on sorts of experiences. So I would suggest that that during COVID, that's probably been a little more limited. It's hard to get kids in the classroom, and most kids are learning remotely. 95% of our school districts are learning remotely. So it's been a little bit of a challenge, but we're working through it. And of course, as soon as we're able, we're going to get kids back in those experiences as fast as we can.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I was just curious if I wasn't exactly sure when that was passed. So it makes a ton of sense, though, of course. So yeah, moving on to a different topic, which is probably the hottest topic right now. You just mentioned the pandemic. Of course, we've been on our seventh month now, going through of course going through the safe and reopening plan and such. I guess I'm curious, first of all, how COVID has affected the 12th district.
Well, I'd say the biggest effect that COVID-19 has had on the 12th legislative district is obviously on our school age, our school age kids. We work really hard in the education committee to address social emotional learning and the inequities gap. And honestly, the inequities that we're seeing right now have been exacerbated because of COVID-19. So, those folks that have resource and are able to educate their kids are going to do it and have had very little interruption. But those folks who maybe are working 2 jobs or a single parent or don't have the resources to make sure their kids are engaged or don't even have the connectivity. And in the 12th district, I represent rural parts of Washington state that are not connected and don't have connectivity. So, those kids are really suffering with respect to how they're learning, and just their ability to connect to the learning environment has been hugely impacted. So, that's my biggest worry, is the fact that we have a large population of kids who are really facing some incredible education issues and education connectivity and education gaps. So I think we'll have a lot of sort of catching up to do and work with kids to make sure that they haven't lost a tremendous amount of time and education in this environment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so given that, and kind of jumping right into my next question with that, I'm curious kind of where you see the success and maybe some policies that could have been not implemented or implemented in a slightly different way in terms of the course of these 7 months with what the governor has outlined as a Safe Start program. I know that's a very controversial topic, and I guess I'm curious what your comments on that is. If you would have done the same, or if you would have done things differently, what you would have done.
Well, I think that's a really no one has all the answers, right, including the governor. And I know that's been incredibly challenging for all of us to navigate this. I would say, I certainly supported the initial shutdown of the economy and of the education system in order to try and address the emergency proclamation, which was don't overrun the hospitals and let's try and keep each other safe and healthy as healthy as possible. So certainly supported that initially. I think one of my continued concerns is for the youngest kids among us. The challenge of not being in school and having your kindergartners through 6th grade kids trying to learn over a Zoom platform has been extremely challenging. And I get emails from people all over the district, especially, again, parents of the youngest kids, kindergartners, 1st graders, who really look at their enrollment in a public school or look at their interaction with kids in a public setting as part of their social emotional learning and as part of their social and emotional growth. And so that's been really challenging. I think we need to move quicker to get those kids in school. I think we need to do all we can to make sure they're safe, make sure the staff members are safe, but really having those kids, the biggest part of their educational development right now is not necessarily math or science. It's really having that social interaction with other kids at those youngest ages. So I think we really need to focus on doing all we can to make sure those kids are able to get back in school as quickly as possible. But aside from all of that, we've got a lot of small businesses in the 12th legislative district that have suffered. And we've got an economy that is suffering, and so really trying to figure out how we help those folks is going to be important moving forward. Regardless of where we've been, we have to look at the future, and we have to think about how we help our friends and neighbors recover in all of this. Lots of job loss in my district, in Okanagan. Lots of it was already one of the highest unemployment areas in the state, but now we're seeing even greater numbers. And so how do we make sure those folks have support moving forward is going to be my focus.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. How do we make sure those folks who have lost their jobs or who may already have been, kind of experiencing effects of different types of unemployment, how do we make sure that those folks are accounted for and taken care of, at least in your mind? What's some proposed solutions or steps on the way to?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging, right? I mean, if we had all the answers, they already be implemented. But I think we're going to have to continue to make sure that we have adjustments to unemployment so that folks have access to unemployment. We have to make sure that folks know about jobs that do exist. I know here locally where I live, we have a ton of folks hiring, and it's been really challenging to find people to fill those vacancies. But continue that outreach, continue that sort of broadcast of opportunity that we want to continue to focus on. But yeah, if folks need help, I mean, we need to get them the dollars that will sustain them. And I think we're working hard as a state, and I know we will work harder once in session to address those needs. But one of the things that I've been saying consistently through this whole pandemic is we just don't know what we don't know. So we sort of have to get to the other side and see where the damage is and where the damage has occurred, and then try and fill the holes once we know them, and then listen to the people, listen to the needs of the people, and try to address them as best we can.
Right. Absolutely. So, I think it's natural when we're talking about things like, the economic recovery from this pandemic and such, to naturally kind of discuss taxes, which I see on your official legislator website. You say you're in support of reducing, tax burdens for working class families, which I think is absolutely something that everyone can get behind, right? And I guess I'm curious because on top of that, kind of every 6 months, it feels like I see an article from one source or another, really truly a varied array of sources, and they're all citing the statistic from the ITEP, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, saying that Washington kind of has the most regressive tax system in the United States. That meaning that, of course, lower class families pay a higher share of their family income in taxes than upper class, richer, top 1% families. I guess I'm curious maybe what your stance or what your general opinions regarding ever changing the Washington tax policy. I don't know anything about it personally, so if there's massive roadblocks to doing that, that'd be great to know as well. But I guess I'm curious, in that pursuit of reducing the tax burdens for working class families, is that something that you're in support of, potentially changing, the Washington tax system to being, at the very least, less regressive?
Absolutely. We talk about this all the time. I, as someone who runs small businesses and represents small businesses, and frankly, in my own family, with respect to how our taxes are paid, we absolutely need to take a look at the whole of the tax structure in Washington State. And I think the one thing that gets missed in this conversation is that we talk about how we add taxes, but we never talk about how we reform the entire system. To your question, I think the whole of the system has to be reformed. I don't think you can just layer upon layer upon layer to try and fix the system. You have to dismantle it. And one of the things that's really interesting, I think a lot of small business owners, a lot of business owners in general, would be in favor of an income tax, but you can't have an income tax on top of the most progressive tax in all of the country. We're the only state in the nation that leverages a business and occupation tax that's leveraged on gross receipts. You can't have both. So how do we look at that? We got to remove potentially the B&O tax and look at an opportunity for an income tax. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, I'm not opposed to refining and redefining the whole of the income, the whole of the tax structure in Washington State. But that has to be a broad conversation. It can't just be keep what we have and layer on. It can't just be, look at ways we can give incentives to certain groups and not others. It has to be a complete and total look at the system. And we haven't been able to do that in Washington State. And I'm not sure why, but I have had good conversations with Representative Frame on the other side of the aisle, and talking to her about how she and I might work together to dismantle that system and start anew. Because, we certainly want to make sure we continue to pay for the things we have as social services in Washington State, and find ways to address those folks who are in the lowest income brackets, so that they're not having to pay exorbitant amounts in taxes while not taking home enough income to sustain their families and lifestyles. So that is a huge conversation, and one that hasn't been undertaken in Washington State in our whole of existence. But I think it's time, and we should address the whole of the tax system.
Absolutely. I'm sure, again, people can get on board with that. Let's see, we've only got a few more minutes left. And so I won't try to drag this out too long, and, let you get back to the important work that I'm sure you have. I just have maybe 3 more questions or so. First of all, kind of a more broadly political question, kind of looking at all this on a larger scale. You've been, in government for some time now, as well as working in the private sector. And I think tangentially to that, over the last few years, we've seen a huge growth in political polarization across the board, right? People in the federal government, in state government, kind of turning their heads to the other side, and at least a perception of that from the public. And I guess I'm curious with your unique perspective as both an elected official and an everyday person who's employed. What do you see that political polarization looking like, maybe in your everyday life, in the Washington State House of Representatives, of course? Could you kind of enlighten us with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. We make it what it is as individuals, right? So my goal as both a private citizen and a elected official is to keep the conduit of communication open. My practice in the state legislature is, and my philosophy is, I've been sent there by the people of the 12th district to represent them and to meet their needs and to help them as best I can. And it's a job like any other, right? You're there to be professional. You're there to represent and be an ambassador for the people of your district. And the way in which you conduct yourself is a representation of the people that have sent you there. And so I take very seriously my role in these conversations. I try never to be the polarizing figure in the room. I try always to be the one that finds common ground. And I think we can do that. I think we can do that as a society. I think we've lost sight of conversation. I think we've lost sight of politics in its truest sense. Ultimately, it's about being a statesperson, right? It's about going and representing the views of your district in a professional way, in a polite way, in a respectful way, that gets your point across and that allows for real debate. And real debate is important, but debate does not mean argument. Debate means we have different points of view and we're going to represent them as best we can and as professionally as we can, and as educated as we can to the people that are making decisions. Excuse me. And that's really important. And I think as a society, we have an obligation to remember that. Remember that we are all human, that we're all unique, and that we all have a right to be where we are. And we all have a right to be present at the conversation. And no one has to have total agreement. No one has to, you don't have to agree with my point of view, and I don't have to agree with your point of view. But where it starts to break down is when we start to get mean and vicious toward one another. And I've never approached that in the legislature. I've never used that in the legislature. It's all about being kind and respectful and professional when it comes to negotiation.
Totally. That's certainly a fair answer to that. Moving on to this campaign specifically, you're running as the only person on the ballot, and even beyond that, you're running as an incumbent and as the only person on the ballot. And so I think in many people's minds, there's um, you're almost already elected, I think. Given that, I guess I'm curious what your outreach efforts or your campaign has looked like. I have no idea what a incumbent, running against themselves, what a campaign of that nature would look like.
Well, I think it's important to point out that I've never run to get reelected. I've always run to serve the people of the 12th district. Excuse me.
Right.
And what that means for me is that you never stop working. You never stop meeting. You conduct yourself as you would in any other campaign. Whereas, what that means is maybe I don't put up a whole bunch of signs, but I can tell you my calendar is full of constituent meetings every 15 minutes on the half hour for meeting after meeting, and even in this environment where we're not meeting in person, it's full. And I think that's so important. You have to be out amongst the people in order to understand the issues. And so my philosophy has always been, if you're not out engaging with the people and the constituents that elected you, you're not doing your job. And of course, I have a huge district, so in some ways, this ability to meet virtually has helped connect people that may have otherwise been harder to get to, but nonetheless, we got to them. It certainly means I don't have to drive 3 hours across the district to get to someone when we can meet virtually or over the phone. And I hope that we continue to employ some of the things we've learned through all this. But yeah, my campaign has always been about engaging with the public, meeting with the public, hearing what they have to say. And again, my involvement with community has always, even before I was elected, was pretty significant. And I've always been I've always volunteered, I've always served in some various capacities because it's what my family taught me to do, and it's what my family values, and it's certainly what I continue to value. And so that's not going to change, even if I were to not run for office or to be unelected.
Fantastic. Great to hear. All right. Well, that just about is all the time we had today. But Representative Steele, it was fantastic to speak with you and hear your thoughts on all these issues. And of course, I wish you best of luck in the election.
Well, thank you so much. I'm certainly impressed by the project and really pleased to be part of the conversation, and always welcome folks to contact me. So I will just leave my contact information here at the end of the conversation, which is mike.steele@ledge.wa.gov. And my office phone number, direct number, is 360-786-7832.
All right, great, fantastic. I'm sure you'll your email and phone will be blown up soon.
Great.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Thanks.